10,000-volt smile on the balcony from her today. She's frailer than she was. She's not as mobile as she has been. But there was clearly a joyfulness in what she felt today.
And joyfulness in what she felt, absolutely. And also, she conveyed that joyfulness to the crowd. There's something very intangible about monarchy, which you don't get in republics. I've called it the magic of monarchy. When the Queen went to address the United Nations in New York, these experienced, seasoned, cynical diplomats were clawing each other to get out of the way to take a photograph of this frail old lady who was coming down. They wouldn't have done that for any president. There is a charisma and an energy that she has and that monarchy has, and that's something very special.
Well, everybody, you know, there'll be Republicans shouting at the telly if they're switching on today, or rather, they won't. They'll be saying, "Oh, look at this couple of sycophants." But actually, I remember seeing her when I used to do the Royal Beat at a function in South Africa, and it was the first time I'd sort of seen her up close. And I had a few words as the Royal Rat Pack, as we were called, were invited to do. She's tiny. She's got these extraordinary blue eyes. And, of course, it's a bit like the first time you go to New York City or something. It feels like you're on a film set because it's familiar. And there is this person in front of you whose face is so familiar from your youngest times, but with this magnetic force.
Exactly, there's an electricity there. And it also comes from the role, of course. But as I said, it's the fact that she has now really assumed the mantle of her mother in becoming the great matriarch of the family, because she is the only figure we have known. And so that actually does... I don't think people really understand quite how deeply that image has permeated the national culture. And I think, you know, in the future, we'll look back on that as a unique moment, not only in this country, but, of course, around the Commonwealth, too.
Rafe, for now, thanks very much indeed. Well, Trooping the Colour. It's been a major royal event for over 260 years, taking place annually to mark the monarch's official birthday. It's a martial spectacle made possible by foot soldiers, but also, obviously, by horses, from the Blues and Royals and Lifeguards in particular. For decades, the Queen was an active equestrian participant in the event, even, many of you will remember on one occasion, steadying her mount when blanks were fired in its direction. We're looking at pictures from today. Apologies if you're listening on radio. It's not a day for you, is it, I suppose? A dramatic reminder on that occasion of how horses have been a constant theme in Her Majesty's long reign. Let's turn to a former editor of Horse and Hound, Lucy Higginson. Lucy, welcome to you. Apart from anything else, I mean, we know the Queen's been riding... I forget what I read recently in Robert Hardman's wonderful book about her life, that she started riding a pony from a very young age, but more remarkably was the age at which she stopped riding. I mean, riding into her 90s.
Yes, it's remarkable. Very few people do that. But I suspect she's had very well prepared ponies to ride that have been, you know, she's downsized over the years from quite large horses to native ponies, which she's a massive supporter of, and she breeds fell ponies and Highland ponies. So she's managed to bring the size of horse down that she's ridden. But I think it's been something that's very important to her to do it for a long time. It must be quiet time and time for herself and just a bit of normal in an otherwise extraordinary life. So, yes, she's definitely Britain's best loved horse rider.
And the normality thing's important, isn't it? I mean, Rafe and I were just talking about how people go weak at the knees, you know, hardened trades union representatives curtsying when they should be bowing. But actually, when she looks at a horse, she's just another person.
That's right. I mean, animals are, I think the Duke of Edinburgh said that horses are great levellers. You have to be very responsible towards them, but also quite tough. They have a way of breaking your heart quite regularly as well. But no, in a life that's full of formality and structure and obligation and a lot of deference, of course, these animals just don't know who you are, as Princess Anne found regularly when she fell off in the water at Badminton Horse Trials years ago. So they just know if you are kind to them and understand them. So from that point of view, it's probably a very grounding thing in the Queen's life. And it's also her hobby as well as her relaxation. You know, she has bred so many horses for so many different parts of the equestrian world. She's never missed a single Royal Windsor Horse Show, which now takes place in her own gardens, in her own grounds. And I think she once said that had she not been born into the royal family, she would have really enjoyed just being a country lady with horses and dogs. You can totally see her having, in another life, run the local pony club or something. They've always been a constant for her, yeah.
And Lucy, she's transmitted that attachment to horses to her children. You mentioned Princess Anne. I mean, an Olympic competitor, I think, in the 3-day event, wasn't she? And a pretty successful one at that. And her children, yes, but grandchildren, successive generations, to what extent are they horsey?
I think it would be unthinkable, really, for a working British royal not to ride, really. It's very much in their DNA. They have horses on all sides. As we've seen today, it's a requirement, really, for them to take part in trooping the colour and so on. So, yes, the Princess Royal was a European champion in 1971, presented the prize by her mother. Prince Charles has ridden in races, amateur races as a jockey. And, of course, Zara Tindall is a former European and world champion and Olympic silver medalist in eventing. So they've bred some pretty stellar riders. And I think we can be fairly certain that the young Prince George and Charlotte and Louis, if not already on a pony, and I think they are, will definitely be following suit.
Well, they enjoyed being pulled in a carriage by horses today, that's for sure. They looked absolutely electrified by the whole thing. Lucy Hickinson, lovely to talk to you. Thanks so much for your time. Let's go to East Yorkshire, where there's been plenty of Jubilee events today. Our reporter Anna Riley is at Hull Marina, where there is a special reenactment today involving some 60 boats. Anna.
Good afternoon, Colin. Yes, we've actually come back to Hessle Foreshore. That's where we are right now. But like you say, there is the flotilla reenactment that's happening. It's about 7 o'clock. There's several boats that are going to come across the Humber. And here we're at an event where hundreds are attending to watch that flotilla and to watch the beacon lighting, complete with fireworks at the end of this evening. And we're also near Humber Bridge, where 2 flagpoles of the Union Jack have been put up to mark the Jubilee, and the Queen actually first opened the Humber Bridge back in 1981. So there's certainly a lot going on here in East Yorkshire and a lot to celebrate, and a real sense of excitement, merriment and happiness in the air for the Jubilee.
You can just hear the buzz around you. I mean, is it any excuse for a party, or are people there united by their affection for the monarch?
I think it's a bit of a combination, having the bank holiday, the time off, definitely an excuse for a party. But I don't know if you can see the cottages here behind me. They're certainly filled with bunting and a lot of people that are happy to celebrate our monarch and to celebrate the 70 years and this Jubilee.
Very much indeed. Anna Riley on Humberside there. Let's get the thoughts of Rafe Heydel-Mankoo, who's been following events today, was at Buckingham Palace, outside Buckingham Palace this morning. On the horse connection, it's such a profound link for the Queen, isn't it? And in a world where everybody is to some degree bowing or scraping, where even our own children have to phone for an appointment ahead, horses treat her normally.
Yes. I'm reminded of Churchill's quote that dogs look up to you, cats look down to you, pigs look you square in the face. But certainly the Queen, I think, is never happier than when she's with horses. And I don't think people really appreciate just how much she's respected internationally in equine circles for her skill and her experience and her knowledge of horses and of breeding. I remember a documentary where she was looking at horses going around trotting, and she said, they're all on the wrong leg. And she was passionate about this. She's won millions from over the years in races, including she just had 4 winners in the last 2 weeks, although unfortunately not going to be at Epsom this year. But there must be something in the genes. We know that horses are basically closely allied with the royalty. Racing is the sport of kings, allegedly. And as you said, if you just look at Zara, look at Princess Anne in the Montreal Olympics, and Lady Louise Windsor now, inheriting Prince Philip's ponies and really taking on his mantle for his particular area of interest there, which pleases the Queen so much.
Rafe, for now, thanks very much indeed. You're with Colin Brazier. This is GB News on TV, online and on digital radio on this special day. Coming up, protesters wearing crowns were arrested after running out in front of marching soldiers as the Queen's Jubilee and the military parade that started it got underway. We'll be joined by a crowd risk analyst, Professor Keith Still. We'll talk about the logistics of organising such a massive event and policing it too. First, we have a break.
Tonight on GB News. At 6, it's Deebs & Co. 7 o'clock, Farage. At 8, join Mark Stein. And at 9, Dan Wootton Tonight, followed by Headliners.
We are GB News.
We're right across this great nation.
On TV.
On radio, on digital.
Absolutely everywhere. We don't talk down to you.
We embrace all voices.
With honest and civilised conversation.
We're not part of the establishment.
We're one of you.
And we're only getting started.
Join us on GB News,
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
Every morning from 6 o'clock, we'll wake you up with GB News Breakfast with all the stories you didn't know from the night before.
So whether it's serious news, entertainment, or your own views from all over our great nation, we're here to kick off your day with a smile.
The national media should be reflecting and reporting what's happening here.
You will notice the northwestern accents.
Whether you're with us on TV, radio, or online, every morning, it's breakfast from 6 a.m. Hope you can join us.
Join us for Ministry of Offence, the comedy panel show that's just like the news, in that the left fights the right and it doesn't really seem to matter who wins. We cover the big stories. It was in fact a troop of baboons and not angry vegans.
I like that.
And the really important stories.
Fat naked cow gets stuck in swimming pool.
It's a headline in a lot of local newspapers. Yeah.
We're on the same team, Nick. Yeah, but I'm just helping you.
Join us for Ministry of Offence, Saturday nights, 8 o'clock on GB News.
I'm Dan Wootton. Join me Monday to Thursday from 9 to 11 for the feistiest and most fun news debate on TV, where free speech reigns. I'll bring you a sharp take on the day's biggest stories, bombshell newsmaker interviews, and A-list guests. And I guarantee you, no spin, no bias, no censorship, and no reason to go to bed. That's Dan Wootton Tonight, Monday to Thursdays from 9 on GB News.
You're with Colin Brazier on GB News on TV and on radio and online as well on this important day, the first day of 4 days to mark the Queen's Platinum Jubilee. Protesters, however, linked to Extinction Rebellion have been arrested after disrupting the start of those Jubilee celebrations. 2 people stormed the Mall during the Trooping the Colour parade and they lay on the ground in front of soldiers who then proceeded to march over them and around them. The protesters, who were booed by the public, reportedly linked to Animal Rebellion, a group similar to Extinction Rebellion, but with a focus on ending livestock farming to combat what they say is the climate emergency. The Met Police said they were arrested for public order-related highway obstruction. Let's turn to the crowd risk analyst, Professor Keith Still, who joins us now. Professor, thanks for your time today. As somebody who used to follow the royals around, I often marvelled at whichever part of the world they were in, and they would do the walkabouts and that sort of thing. And there was so rarely public order problems, given so many cameras were looking. And if you wanted to make a political point, it would be so easy.
Yes, and unfortunately, thank you for having me on the show, by the way. A marvellous event today. It is relatively difficult to completely secure an area, but what we did see today was a rapid police response, a very appropriate response to the situation, which could have been anything. So, remove the offenders, get them out of the way. But you noticed from the crowd reaction just exactly how unpopular that was. I don't think they've done their cause very much good today.
No, I think that's probably true. I mean, I have to say, Professor, I did a little bit about whether we should even be covering this story. I suspect some other media outlets have had the same calculation in their minds. Do you give them the oxygen publicity? There were thousands and thousands and thousands of people on the Mall. There were millions watching at home and around the world. Why should 2 people or 3 people get so much disproportionate attention?
Well, they didn't, in fact. I mean, that was over within a minute. And of course, we're talking about people being arrested for criminal offences. What we did see, though, was a very tried and tested crowd management plan. And I was involved in the planning team back in 2011 for the royal wedding then. And it was very good to see all of the planning, all the operations, all of the contingencies in place today. So I recognise quite a significant proportion of the site from maps, plans and diagrams that we were drawing up at the time. So well tried, well tested, well executed, an excellent event. So, a minor fracas, which was over in less than a minute. And it just a testament to the police response, how quickly they responded to it, cleared out the area. And of course, there would have been a whole raft of analysis of the crowd and counter-terrorism measures in place. Everything behind the scenes that we don't talk about, that you can't see, are already in place. So a lot of the security that goes on, we can't discuss for obvious reasons. But, when you do get somebody like this breaking through, well, the unpredictable nature of crowds can sometimes result in that. But you just saw the rapid police response and how quickly they got them out of the way.
Yeah. And as you say, from the event that you were involved in planning before, events like that, it's, you're standing on the shoulders of giants to some degree, aren't you? It's been grooved and grooved and grooved, and one event follows another, and maybe it evolves and tacks a little bit, but the broad essence of it remains the same. I suppose part of the problem in your conversations you would have had for that royal wedding, Keith, were the fact that the palace always recognised the necessity of the monarch and members of the royal family being seen. That, the Queen is reported to have said, I have to be seen to be believed. I mean, you could create a sterile environment that would be totally, totally safe, but there'd be nobody on the mall.
Precisely. Again, this is always the balance between understanding the risks, getting public access. Certainly know that all the discussions well over a decade ago now were around facilitating members of the public, and a lot of the issues were involved with press locations. I think there was some 10 or, if I recall, 10 or maybe 20,000 press reporters from around the world at the royal wedding in 2011. So facilitating them, balancing that with the public who want to come to the site. And then what happens if there are too many people turn up? How do we develop them to various strategies? So months and months. In fact, the planning started well over a year out for royal events. And I certainly know that I was working with a 3-park analysis for the royal parks. So these plans are all tried and tested. And again, risk assessment, risk mitigation, if something does manage to breach through, a relatively low-level incursion, and very, very promptly dealt with. And lovely to see the crowd booing them. Why spoil a day like this?
Yeah, no, it's a good question, and you're absolutely right about the crowd's response. It was just what was needed. Professor Keith Still, thanks so much for your time. Really appreciate it. Rafe Heydel-Mankoo is alongside me to reflect on, the wonderful work that's done by people behind the scenes to make these events work in the way that they do. And there is that constant tension between the necessity of being seen and the need, obviously, to keep the royal family safe.
That's right. It's been many years now that police have turned their back on the royal family to face the audience, because when I was young, they used to face as a mark of respect. Now they face the other way, whilst the soldiers don't. But there was a very visible police presence, and a properly armed police presence with proper machine guns whatever those high-powered guns are that I saw. But they weren't visible, but if you went around afterwards, you saw just how strong that presence was, and it's necessary. I'm all for protest. I'm the first one to defend the right to protest, but there's a time and a place for these things, and the Platinum Jubilee isn't it. This is an occasion for positivity, to unify people and the nation and bring people together. I happened to speak earlier on today to a very senior retired cabinet minister who's a staunch Republican, and he said, now is not the day to discuss republicanism. Now is not the day for negativity. This is a time to celebrate a long life. And I thought that was such a mature stance to take, and it's just a shame that these characters don't do it. And the photographs, yet again, with all of these rebellion types, yet more privileged middle-class people with far too much time on their hand and a need to have a reality check. And, whilst we can perhaps get behind insulation, the Insulate Britain raison d'etre, this cause of rewilding is far more controversial. It isn't quite such a settled issue. And this is hardly the way to win over a very sizable chunk of the population who don't consider it valid.
And we mentioned earlier the involvement, the equestrian involvement. I mean, that's another thing that can go wrong at these events when you're dealing with animals.
Yes,
obviously.
Well, even at the best of times, and we saw actually today, we saw some horses being startled by the cheers of the crowds and being hard to manage if you've got people jumping out at them. But also think about the children. This is supposed to be a long-lasting memory, and I can't even begin to imagine what some of those young children who are looking would have thought was happening.
Yeah, it's a wonderful thing, isn't it? It's a wonderful thing for those people who took the time to come to central London today. And of course, as Anna Riley was making clear from Hull a while ago, it's something, and we're not reflecting this entirely at the moment, happening all around, not just the UK, but around the Commonwealth as well, up and down the land, villages and towns and big cities throughout the next 3 days to come. We'll try and reflect that for you in our Jubilee coverage. The Palace has released a new portrait of the Queen to celebrate the monarch's 70 years on the throne. We'll be discussing how photography's evolved during the Queen's reign with the royal photographer and author Chris Jackson. First, we'll bring you up to date with the latest news headlines.
Colin, thank you. Good afternoon. The top stories. The first of the Platinum Jubilee celebrations have taken place today, with Her Majesty the Queen watching the royal fly past from the Buckingham Palace balcony. Royal Air Force jets flew in the formation of a number 70 to mark the number of years of Her Majesty's reign. The famous Red Arrows also took part in the display today, streaming the Union flag colours above Buckingham Palace. And royal gun salutes were also taking place across the country as part of the celebrations. And the Duke of York will miss tomorrow's Jubilee Thanksgiving service at St Paul's Cathedral after testing positive for COVID. Buckingham Palace is saying the infection came to light during routine testing. It's understood Prince Andrew has seen the Queen in the last few days, but not since he tested positive. NHS Director Professor Stephen Powis is among over 1,000 people who've been recognised in the Queen's Jubilee Honours list. He'll be made a knight, while Chief Nursing Officer Ruth May will be made a dame. The actor, Damien Lewis, has been made a CBE, and the Scottish crime writer Ian Rankin has been knighted. Meanwhile, former Northern Ireland First Minister and GB News presenter Arlene Foster has also been made a dame.
Well, of course, this is a personal honour and I'm really delighted with it, but I hope it will be reflected back on the people of Fermanagh and South Tyrone who give me such support when I was their member. And indeed, as I say, as the first female First Minister, it's wonderful to have this acknowledgement.
Congratulations to her. Well, in international news, President Zelensky now says Russia occupies a fifth of Ukraine's territory. The Ukrainian leader says 100 people are dying every day in fighting in the east of the country. That comes as British military intelligence says Russia has control of most of the strategically important city of Severodonetsk. You're up to date on TV, online and on your radio via DAB+. You're with GB News. Brazier's here in just a moment.
Direct Bullion sponsors the Finance Report on GB News for gold and silver investment.
Here's today's markets as they stand. The pound is 1.256 to the dollar. The pound is 1.170 to the euro. And the price of gold currently stands at £1,487.26 an ounce.
Direct Bullion sponsors the Finance Report on GB News for gold and silver investment.
We are GB News.
We're right across this great nation.
On TV,
on radio, on digital.
Absolutely everywhere. We don't talk down to you.
We embrace all voices.
with honest and civilised conversation.
We're not part of the establishment.
We're one of you. And we're only getting started.
Join us on GB News,
the People's Channel,
Britain's news channel.
Every morning from 6 o'clock, we'll wake you up with GB News Breakfast with all the stories you didn't know from the night before.
So whether it's serious news, entertainment, or your own views from all over our great nation, we're here to kick off your day with a smile.
And the national media should be reflecting and reporting what's happening here.
You will notice the northwestern accents.
Whether you're with us on TV, radio, or online, every morning, it's breakfast from 6 a.m. Hope you can join us.
Join us for Ministry of Offence, the comedy panel show that's just like the news, in that the left fights the right and it doesn't really seem to matter who wins. We cover the big stories. It was in fact a troop of baboons and not angry vegans.
I like that.
And the really important stories.
Fat naked cow gets stuck in swimming pool.
It's a headline in a lot of local newspapers. Yeah.
We're on the same team, Nick. Yeah, but I'm just helping you.
Join us for Ministry of Offence, Saturday nights, 8 o'clock on GB News.
I'm Dan Wootton. Join me Monday to Thursday from 9 to 11 for the feistiest and most fun news debate on TV, where free speech reigns. I'll bring you a sharp take on the day's biggest stories, bombshell newsmaker interviews, and A-list guests. And I guarantee you, no spin, no bias, no censorship, and no reason to go to bed. That's Dan Wootton tonight, Monday to Thursdays from 9 on GB News.
This is GB News. You're with Colin Brazier on TV, online and on digital radio. Now, the Palace has released a new portrait of Her Majesty the Queen to celebrate the monarch's 70 years on the throne. The photograph was taken at the Victoria Vestibule at Windsor Castle by Ranald McKechnie, who also shot the Queen's portrait for her 90th birthday, as well as one to mark the start of a new decade in 2020. Her Majesty, the most photographed woman in the world, whose public life has been chronicled by photographers, but also lived in the glare of flashlights and to the constant accompaniment of camera shutters like nobody else. Photography obviously evolving during the course of her long reign, from the days of box brownies to today's digital cameras, but interest in the monarch remains undiminished, with royal photographers vying to capture her most memorable moments. We're joined by the royal photographer Chris Jackson, who's been taking photographs during the course of today's proceedings as well. Chris, welcome to you. I was struck at one point by the fly past. Oh, we had pictures talking about photography, and then we had none. Well, I tell you what, we'll try and fix that. Rafe Heydel-Mankoo, thank goodness, is alongside me. I'll just reflect on one thing with Rafe before we go back to Chris Jackson. And it's this, that professional photographers who make a living from taking royal photos, like Chris, they're up against everybody now with these things. And there was a moment during the fly past at the Mall, if you look at the picture of the crowd, I would guess 8 out of 10 people, heads back, smartphones ready, taking pictures, not necessarily in the moment, but making sure they wanted to capture the moment. That's where we've got to with photography towards the end of her reign.
Yes, I have to confess, I was filming the royal family balcony on my own phone, and I thought, what am I doing? Let's actually live for the moment, you're right. But yes, you know, phones are great, amateur photography is great, but I've always been a great fan of Cecil Beaton, who was the wonderful photographer in the 1950s, who captured, there's always those sepia tone, fantasy-style photographs of the Queen, Princess Margaret, and the Queen Mother, and you can't really do that. Well, I don't know, maybe there are filters now. I'm a bit of a Luddite on phones that can do it, but I don't really think so. So there's still very much a space for photography.
Well, let's turn to Chris Jackson. We've got it to work. Chris, what were you trying to capture today?
Well, I mean, what an incredible day. It's incredible. Cecil Beaton, just sort of going back to him, what an incredible photographer, and it's amazing that so many fantastic photographers have photographed the Queen over the years. And I've been fortunate enough to photograph her for almost 20 years now. And it's just a snapshot of her life. And it's just incredible that she has outlasted the careers of so many different photographers. And it's sort of my small part to add to that archive of those incredible images over the years. And today I was there for the Platinum Jubilee on the QVM, the Queen Victoria Memorial, to capture those kind of the balcony moment with the royal family and all the other elements that made today such a special day.
I think I'm right in saying, Chris, that we're looking at some of your work right now. Time was, when I think back to my years as a royal correspondent over 20 years ago, Chris, that there were photographers then they'd made a good living out of it, particularly during the Diana years. I was just mentioning the fact that everybody's got, people have smartphones now. Can you still make a decent living out of this?
Well, you know, everyone, as you say, everyone's got smartphones and technology changes, and that's a really important part of the job. There was a few people commenting when I was walking back today, you know, you have to have these massive lenses for photographing the balcony shots. You've got a lot of different technical things to contend with. Heat haze, for example, on a day like today. So yes, of course, you know, the technology is amazing with things like smartphones, but there is still a place for specialist equipment and of course access and a variety of things that go into what I suppose, you know, making the role of relevant.
And trust as well. I mean, if you think about, you know, there's, as you know, there's this thing called the Royal Rota, where you get special access to events, and you're part of a group of journalists who get, you know, kind of privileged access to what's actually happening. But as members of the royal family get to know you, and you look at people like, you know, the famous sort of Arthur Edwards from The Sun, and there was an element of trust that came into things, which was worked really well for both parties.
Of course. I mean, I suppose like any genre of photography over the years, you get to know the people you're photographing. One of the things that makes photographing the royals so special is you get to know a small group of people, the nuances and their characters over the years very well. And that is something which makes it a nice area to work in. Whilst you don't have the variety of people that you photograph, maybe celebrity photography or something like that, it's lovely to get to know the characters of the different royals. You might be photographing the Queen one day, the Prince of Wales the next day, and they're both very different to photograph.
Chris, I don't suppose we know yet, until we open tomorrow's newspapers, what the shot of the day was. But there were lovely pictures of Prince George, Louis, Princess Charlotte, in particular Louis, who I think we can agree at, what is he, 4 years of age? He's a tiny tearaway.
I'm not sure. Exactly. Well, you know, this is what's so lovely about today and what's so special about things like Trooping the Colour is you get to see, it's kind of a touch point for a royal photographer throughout the year. You get to see the children grow up. You look back over the years and every year they've changed. And it's that kind of reference point for royal photography. And it's great to see the children. We see them so rarely. And so when you do see them, it's very special. And it made some lovely pictures today. Really nice to see the Queen with her family together on the balcony.
Chris, the picture editors of the magazines and the newspapers, what did they want from the guys on the ground like you today? What was the image that they absolutely want to put on the front of tomorrow's paper?
That's a really good question, and I'm not sure I can tell you the exact answer, because a day like today, and I've just been going through my edit of pictures, there you go, Duchess of Cambridge, and there's so many lovely pictures on a day like today. In this picture, you know, this tells a story about how many people were there, what a great atmosphere it was, and there's so many elements to the story today. I couldn't tell you exactly. Of course, it's all about the Queen, the Platinum Jubilee. She is the focus. So I imagine it'll be her with the family in some context. And of course, yeah, you know, the children were always the stars of the show. So it's great to see them.
Yeah. Chris Jackson, really lovely to talk to you. I hope you've had a good day, with more to come, of course, as well. Chris Jackson.
Yes, the beacon lighting tonight. Thank you.
Yep, exactly. Thanks very much indeed. Rafe Heydel-Mankoo is alongside me. There's a difference between the sorts of pictures very often that Chris Jackson's taking and some of those sort of signature portraits, which are such an important, I mean, you mentioned Cecil Beaton, you know, which are such an important part of what the Queen does. We are 70 years on from the coronation. We think of that amazing coronation picture, the royal sceptre and the orb. It moves beyond photography into a type of royal art almost, doesn't it? Portraiture.
Well, they become iconic, and they become era-defining almost. But one of the things I like to point out is that the Queen is the most photographed person in history, and her image has been reproduced more times than anybody else's, and that's a record that will never be beaten. Because you think about all of the banknotes and the coins, not only here, but in Australia, New Zealand and Canada. And of course, we're moving to, and the stamps as well, and we're moving to a cashless society too, and invariably you're going to have more countries becoming republics. Yeah. So there will never be another person in history whose image has become so well known.
Really good points all, Rafe. For now, thanks very much indeed. Well, time to take a look at celebrations, some celebrations outside the capital. We've just been in Hull. We've had the Trooping the Colour, of course, the Royal Air Force fly past in London. But small villages, towns and other, I was going to use the word provincial, it's not a word I particularly like to use, but cities outside of London, across the UK, and as well some overseas, have been organising street parties and other unique events. We're going to turn to GB News' South West of England reporter, Jeff Moody, who joins us from Cornwall. There's a bit of a delay on the line, but Jeff, tell us what's going on there.
Well, it was interesting what you were saying about cameras evolving over the years, because now, of course, we can come live to you with just a little box of tricks, but that does rely on the mobile phone signal being good. And there I was half an hour ago in the middle of Port Isaac, street party happening behind me, bunting, fishermen everywhere, absolutely beautiful, no signal, so I've come up here. But the view from up here certainly isn't too bad. But what I can tell you is that down in Port Isaac, things are certainly hotting up, the beer is flowing, everyone's having a good time. They're expecting record numbers to pour into the county over the course of this weekend, but they don't actually refer to it as a county. Oh no, don't tell a Cornishman they live in Cornwall County, it's a duchy. And that's quite important. Their royal connection is very important to them. Of course, their governor, their boss is Prince Charles and Camilla. They're the Duke and Duchess of Cornwall, and they own most of Cornwall. A lot of the land down here is owned by the duchy. That means that the people that live there pay rent. It also means that if you die intestate, not having made a will, Prince Charles gets your money. Interesting fact there. But as I say, the celebrations are in full swing. There's the beacon lighting tonight, which I'm going to head down to. I'm going to head down to Land's End, the first beacon in England, or the last beacon in England, of course, depending on which way you're facing. That'll be about 10:15, so I'm going to stay there for the lighting of that. And then tomorrow and for the whole of the weekend, it's non-stop street parties. Someone has to do this job, don't they?
Jeff, terrific. Thanks very much indeed. Jeff Moody in Cornwall, the Duchy of Cornwall. Rafe Heydel-Mankoo, to reflect here now on that important distinction, which I have to say hadn't really occurred to me before, but yeah, it's not a county, right?
No,
Cornwall?
well, yes, the Duke of the Duchy of Cornwall is very, very ancient. In fact, the Prince of Wales doesn't receive any money from the state, from the civil list, or now the sovereign support grant. All of the Prince of Wales money comes directly from the Duchy of Cornwall. But the profits from that, and people may be familiar with the not so inexpensive delicacies called that bear the same name of duchy. But those profits go into the Cornish industry and go into supporting unemployed people and youth initiatives. So it's very much a reciprocal arrangement.
OK, Rafe, for now, thanks very much indeed. Well, our royal reporter, Cameron Walker, has been looking back at the Queen's 70-year-long reign.
Inevitably, a long life can pass by many milestones. My own is no exception.
Her Majesty the Queen, speaking in 2015 when she overtook her great-great-grandmother Queen Victoria as Britain's longest reigning monarch. This year, we celebrate her Platinum Jubilee, 70 years on the throne. Trooping the Colour is a large part of June's celebrations and has marked the official birthday of the British sovereign for more than 2 centuries. 96 years ago, the then Princess Elizabeth was born, not in a palace, but in a townhouse. She wasn't expected to be queen, but her uncle, King Edward VIII's sudden abdication to marry an American divorcee propelled Elizabeth up the line of succession.
I declare before you all that my whole life, whether it be long or short, shall be devoted to your service.
Even on her birthday, Her Majesty continues with duties and works through her daily red box of government papers. 14 British Prime Ministers have served her, as well as 15 Australian and 12 Canadians. She has advised and guided each of them through troubled times, while always knowing when to lighten the mood.
Thank you, Mr. Prime Minister of Canada, for making me feel so old.
Last night, a specially commissioned Platinum Jubilee portrait was released to mark the beginning of the celebrations. The Queen hopes that the coming days will provide an opportunity to reflect on all that has been achieved during the last 70 years as we look to the future with confidence and enthusiasm. Cameron Walker, GB News.
Royal commentator Rafe Heydel-Mankoo is alongside me. Rafe, just a flash there of the fabled royal wit.
Yes. Well, I mean, I think that's something she inherited from her mother, who was very, very, very well known for that wit. And it's rather interesting to see the humorous side of the Queen, which often she doesn't naturally portray a smiley face. but there is a keen wit and a sparkle in the eye, and those who know her personally are, find her very sharp.
One of those 14 prime ministers Cameron Walker was just mentioning there was on the radio this morning, Sir John Major, who said he'd wished she'd been in his cabinet. Not seriously, but such was that level of political wisdom and experience.
It's something which I don't think people fully appreciate, but having your first Prime Minister as Winston Churchill isn't a bad way to start your tenureship. And I think every Prime Minister has said that those meetings that they had weekly with the Queen were not mere formalities, were not merely ceremonies. These were meaningful relationships where the Queen's duty is to advise, is to warn rather, and to express concern. And of course, we're never privy to what those conversations are or what they entail, but the suggestions that have been made by Prime Minister is that they have had an impact on those Prime Ministers. Yeah. Never interfering, but maybe giving pause for reflection.
We'll often get people emailing in of a more Republican bent who'll say, well, they're layabouts, it's not real work. I hope we can send them some pictures from today, by the way, just rather than having us two boring old so-and-sos gapping away. There's a requirement for a political acumen, but actually putting in the hours in as well.
But there's something else, and it's something that has been called in recent decades the welfare monarchy. Because the monarchy exists to champion causes and organisations that aren't sexy, that don't attract the celebrity cameras, that won't find themselves, attached to a Hollywood celebrity like Brad Pitt or so forth. But it's the Girl Guides, it's St John's Ambulance, it's the soup kitchens, and it's this idea about building a civil society. And the monarchy has stood for the voluntary ethic, and its involvement with all of these very understated charities is very much the backbone of civil society in this country. Giving those patronages means something. A royal visit will give these organisations more exposure than
you make a point that's often overlooked. I was talking to somebody who works in your sort of role for a different channel, actually, recently. He was saying, all this talk of slimming down the royal family, that's great. We get the logic of that. But actually, that still doesn't alter the fact that they are getting dozens of letters and emails every week from organisations saying, could you please open this fete? Could you please plant this tree? Could you please open this new community centre? And they want a bit of that stardust.
Yes, because it's invaluable. And there's something which you find in Canada and Australia, but you don't really find elsewhere, that degree of involvement in voluntary causes. You can't imagine the American presidents doing it quite the same way. It's something which I think we should be very proud of, and the monarchy has really changed and evolved over the course of the 20th century to focus, I would say, more on those vitally important social welfare issues than it does, in fact, on the politics.
Rafe, for now, thanks very much indeed. We're going to take a short break, and afterwards we're going to reflect on the 5 things we would like you to know before 5 o'clock. Stay with us.
And looking ahead to this evening, it is going to be quite dry, with plenty of warm sunshine for most, though there is rain in Northern Ireland. Let's have a look at the details now. Let's zoom into the southwest, where we can see there's plenty of sunny spells with just a little cloud bubbling up, which could produce an isolated shower or so, but it's going to stay mostly dry. If we head to the east, the weather is pretty much the same. Lots of warm, sunny spells, with a little cloud bringing the risk of an isolated light shower. Let's head to Wales now. It's going to be mostly dry again with warm, sunny spells, though we could see a couple of clouds and they could produce an isolated shower. If we head eastwards into the Midlands, the weather's again set to stay remain mostly dry with sunny spells throughout this evening, although again we could see a bit of drizzle here and there. If we head to the northeast, there is a chance of a shower. That's going to increase quite a little. Potentially an odd heavy shower is possible there as well, though it will remain mostly dry for most people. And it's a similar picture as we move across the north and into southern Scotland. Mostly dry with sunny spells, but there is expected to be an occasional heavy shower, particularly in the east. In Northern Ireland, it's going to be mostly cloudy with the best of the brighter spells likely in the east of the province. Outbreaks of locally heavy rain, though, will slowly edge across eastern areas, and the rain, when it clears, it'll develop showery spells over northern England and northern Wales. But elsewhere, most of us at least should remain dry throughout the night, and the weather shaping up into tomorrow morning.
Every morning from 6 o'clock, we'll wake you up with GB News Breakfast with all the stories you didn't know from the night before.
So whether it's serious news, entertainment, or your own views from all over our great nation, we're here to kick off your day with a smile.
And the national media should be reflecting and reporting what's happening here.
You will notice the northwestern accents.
Whether you're with us on TV, radio, or online, every morning, it's breakfast from 6 a.m. Hope you can join us.
Oh, I'm Michelle Dewberry, and you can join me every weekday 6 till 7 on Jubes and Kerr. Me and my panel will get stuck right into the day's events, and I can tell you, in fact, I can warn you, expect some robust debate, some strong opinions and perspectives from both sides of the fence. It's about you at home as well. I love to read out all of your comments, or at least as many as I can. So join me, Michelle Dewberry, Monday to Friday, 6 till 7 on Jubes and Kerr.
We are GB News.
We're right across this great nation.
On TV,
on radio, on digital.
Absolutely everywhere.
We don't talk down to you.
we embrace all voices with honest and civilised conversation.
We're not part of the establishment.
We're one of you. And we're only getting started.
Join us on GB News,
the People's Channel,
Britain's news channel.
Every morning from 6 o'clock, we'll wake you up with GB News Breakfast with all the stories you didn't know from the night before.
So whether it's serious news, entertainment, or your own views from all over our great nation, we're here to kick off your day with a smile.
And the national media should be reflecting and reporting what's happening here.
You will notice the northwestern accents.
Whether you're with us on TV, radio, or online, every morning, it's breakfast from 6 a.m. Hope you can join us.
Join us for Ministry of Defence, the comedy panel show that's just like the news, in that the left fights the right and it doesn't really seem to matter who wins. We cover the big stories. It was in fact a troop of baboons and not angry vegans.
I like that.
And the really important stories.
Fat naked cow gets stuck in swimming pool.
It's a headline in a lot of local newspapers. Yeah.
We're on the same team, Nick. Yeah, but I'm just helping you.
Join us for Ministry of Defence, Saturday nights, 8 o'clock on GB News.
I'm Dan Wootton. Join me Monday to Thursday from 9 to 11 for the feistiest and most fun news debate on TV, where free speech reigns. I'll bring you a sharp take on the day's biggest stories, bombshell newsmaker interviews, and A-list guests. And I guarantee you, no spin, no bias, no censorship, and no reason to go to bed. That's Dan Wootton Tonight, Monday to Thursdays from 9 on GB News.
Tonight on GB News. At 6, it's Dubes and Co. 7 o'clock, Farage. At 8, join Mark Stein. And at 9, Dan Wootton Tonight, followed by Headliners.
Fraction shy of 5 o'clock. Hi there, welcome to Brazier. Coming up live at 5, 70 aircraft soared over central London, including the Red Arrows, historic wartime bombers and current RAF aircraft recently seen responding to events in Kabul and Ukraine and the coronavirus pandemic. We'll talk to a former Red Arrows pilot. Also, beacons will be lit all around the UK this evening and across the Commonwealth to mark the Jubilee. Our reporter Doogie Beattie has the details for you. And royal fervour takes hold in America. We'll hear from the friend of the show, Paul Duddridge from Los Angeles, about how Hollywood is or isn't getting into the Jubilee spirit. Alongside me through the course of the next 2 hours, we've got Rafe Heydel-Mankoo. But first, we have the day's latest news headlines with Polly.
Colin, thank you. Good afternoon. The top stories, as you've been hearing, the first of the Platinum Jubilee celebrations have been taking place today with Her Majesty the Queen watching a royal flypast from the balcony of Buckingham Palace. Royal Air Force jets There in the centre of your screen, if you're watching on television, forming the number 70 in the sky to mark the number of years Her Majesty has been on the throne. The famous Red Arrows too are also taking part in the display, streaming the Union flag colours in smoke above Buckingham Palace. And royal gun salutes also taking place across the UK today as part of Jubilee celebrations. The Duchess of Cornwall, the Duchess of Cambridge and her 3 children, George, Charlotte and Louis, waving at the crowds during the carriage procession earlier. And the Prince of Wales, the Duke of Cambridge and the Princess Royal on horseback in their uniforms too, leading Trooping of the Colour. Millions of people across the nation have been sending their best wishes to the Queen.
We do it really well in Britain, don't we? Nobody like us Brits can put on a show. It is amazing, absolutely amazing. I was going to say the music for me, the band was probably my number one, but I did have a glimpse of Princess Anne on her horse as well.
Yeah, I did.
Yeah, you saw Princess Anne, didn't you?
Oh,
it was just lovely, and then there was all the carriages with Kate and Camilla and all those. It was just lovely, wasn't it? Yeah. We're so glad we came. We ummed and ahed, but it was a lot of hard work to get here and so busy, but worth every minute, wasn't it?
Yeah, absolutely, yeah.
Well, President Biden and the First Lady have wished Her Majesty a joyful Platinum Jubilee celebration, and they've thanked her for her friendship to the American people.
Your Majesty, congratulations on your Platinum Jubilee. For 70 years, you've inspired people with your selfless devotion and service to the people of the United Kingdom and the Commonwealth.
Throughout the years, the joy your visits to the United States have brought Americans and your solidarity with the American people in times of tragedy have deepened the friendship and profound connection between our countries.
On behalf of the people of the United States, we send you our best wishes to you and the people around the world marking this momentous and historic occasion.
Well, the Duke of York will miss tomorrow's Jubilee Thanksgiving service at St Paul's Cathedral after he's tested positive for COVID. Buckingham Palace says the infection came to light during routine testing. It's understood Prince Andrew has seen the Queen in the last few days, but not since he tested positive. And as you've been hearing, police have arrested several protesters who entered the ceremonial route on the Mall ahead of Trooping the Colour in central London today. So-called animal rebellion demonstrators were dragged out of the way by police as a military band marched along the path at around 10 o'clock this morning. Met Assistant Commissioner Louisa Rolfe says the force is working hard to give people a safe and fun day in the capital. Now, more than 1,000 people have been honoured in the Queen's Jubilee Honours list. Medical staff who worked through the COVID pandemic are among them, including NHS Director Professor Stephen Powis, who'll be made a knight, and Chief Nursing Officer Ruth May, who's going to be made a dame in the honours list. Also honoured, actor Damian Lewis, he's been made a CBE, and the crime writer Ian Rankin has been knighted on the list. Meanwhile, the former Northern Ireland First Minister and GB News presenter Arlene Foster has been made a dame.
Well, of course, it's a personal honour and I'm really delighted with it, but I hope it will be reflected back on the people of Fermanagh and South Tyrone who give me such support when I was their member. And indeed, as I say, as the first female First Minister, it's wonderful to have this acknowledgement.
Congratulations to her. Now, in international news, President Zelensky says Russia now occupies a fifth of Ukraine's territory. The Ukrainian leader says 100 people are dying every day in fighting in the east of the country. And that comes as British military intelligence says Russia now has control of most of the strategically important city of Severodonetsk. And lastly, the actor Johnny Depp has confirmed he'll join the singer Jeff Beck for the remainder of his UK tour. That's after the actor won his multi-million-pound defamation lawsuit against his ex-wife, Amber Heard. The jury unanimously finding she acted with malice in a 2018 article in which she claimed she was a victim of sexual violence. Miss Heard was separately awarded £1.6 million after jurors found Mr Depp's lawyer defamed her when he called her abuse claims a hoax. You're up to date on GB News. More news as it happens. Now back to Brazier.
Well, a very good afternoon to you. We're going to start with a recap, if you missed it, of the past few hours of royal pageantry. Here are some of the best pictures from today's events that took place in central London. First things first, there was the Trooping of the Colour, the parade at Horse Guards. The Duchess of Cornwall, the Duchess of Cambridge, and her three children, the Princes George and Louis and Princess Charlotte, in that barouche carriage, all leaving Buckingham Palace to make their way up the Mall, the odd naughty horse. And the parade itself, some 240 horses, riders, forming part of a tradition that marks the sovereign's birthday. There we go, the foot soldiers from the Household Division marching on to Horse Guards parade itself. Around 1,400 troops marching their way around Horse Guards parade to the sound of some 10 military bands forming one big massed band. A portion of the Trooping of the Colour at Buckingham Palace, at the end there, where the palace is, overlooked by the balcony, watched by Her Majesty the Queen herself, accompanied by the Duke of Kent, her cousin. And then a moment that was shared by, I imagine, many millions across the capital, if they looked skywards, the Lancaster bombers and other the fighters of, what were they, Hurricanes and Spitfires, and then the Typhoons forming the number 70, marking the number of years of the Queen's reign. And followed in pretty short order, all the way down the Mall. They'd been massing over southeast England earlier in the day. The Red Arrows, the precision flyers at the Red Arrows, with their jet streams in the three colours of the Union flag. All of this watched by the assembled royals and Her Majesty herself from the balcony. And a story I suspect is going to be in some of the papers tomorrow. You won't see it necessarily from this angle, but Prince Louis shielding his ears from the noise, whilst, well, the script here in front of me says making an amusing face. That's for you to judge, isn't it? Let's turn, I'm delighted to say, to the royal writer Angela Levin, who's had a very long day, alongside Rafe Heydel-Mankoo, who's also been up since very early this morning to cover events in central London. Angela, welcome.
Thank you.
Nice day?
It's been magic, actually. I feel really happy that I think she sort of brought the whole country alive. There was a feeling there that, you know, everybody wanted to be there. All sorts of people, young, old, in between, every nationality, wearing all sorts of different clothes, which means they have different views. And it was just thronging with people. And after the pandemic, where you didn't go out, and I didn't feel I was ready to sort of socialise much, you know, it's really made me very happy and thinking, well, she always comes up with the right thing, Her Majesty. You know, her words or her being or this amazing event. And it just makes you smile and be happy and lifts your spirit.
You write books, but you also write for the Daily Mail. If you are the editor of the Daily Mail tonight, what is the picture you put on your front page tomorrow?
I put the three children in there, and especially the one where Charlotte kept putting down Louis's hand because he waved longer than he should have done, presumably, and he kept looking at her, putting it back up again. But she was very maternal, quite strict. You know, takes things very seriously. She's very strong-minded. But the three of them were just gorgeous.
And it was quite a thing for the three of them to be in this carriage alone. Were there adults in the...
Yes, Camilla and...
They were on the other side of the carriage from them.
The other side, yes. And they were talking non-stop and they loved it. But what was very moving was that when they went to pass the colour, they bent their heads down, as they'd obviously been told to do, absolutely the correct thing. But they all did it without you seeing that Catherine saying, you know, come on now. Yeah. They just held it down. And you thought how beautifully they're being brought up.
But how symbolically as well, because today, obviously, and the next 3 days, the focus on the 96-year-old sovereign, but actually a reminder in that carriage of the future generations of royals that will, in the form of George, we presume, one day be king.
Yes, and then you had Prince Charles, who led the horses out to inspect the troops, and behind him, Prince William, all looking immaculate, all in total control of the beautiful horses. Everybody was cleaned up, you know, everything. And they just moved very slowly forward with the horses. Everything was under control. It had all been rehearsed, discussed. And it was just wonderful to see. So you've got from that age to the little ones who are already learning what sort of life they're going to have. But it's done in a very nice way. And I think they were very excited to be in the coach.
The point about rehearsals is a really important one. I remember watching a rehearsal at about 4:30 in the morning, and it felt like the dead of night. It was completely dark, and all the soldiers were in their green khaki. They'd not got the bearskins or the red tunics on. And these things, that's when it happens. People wonder if this thing all sort of comes together by magic. No, it doesn't. There's a lot of rehearsing going on, a lot of drilling, but it happens in the dead of night.
Yes, interesting.
Amazing. Just in terms of the next 3 days, Angela, I mean, our tribe, journalists, we're not very good at just telling a story straight, are we? And just saying, let the pictures talk for themselves. We're quite good at being ironical and slightly mocking from time to time. It wasn't the day for that type of thing, was it?
Absolutely wasn't. No, it absolutely wasn't. It was a day for huge smiles and twinkling in the eye, and just to have a wonderful time. Actually, what was very interesting is that by the time I arrived, there were so many people there that they got blocks that wouldn't let me go through to collect my pass into the area of Buckingham Palace. And I had to get a policeman, and I had to sort of push my way through masses of people. Normally, someone would yell at me, you know, I was here, what are you doing? How are you pushing in? Everybody just, they didn't know who I was, but they opened up, they go, oh, you need to go.
They didn't know who you were.
Yeah, they didn't know who I was, I can guarantee it. No, that they just were being friendly. They weren't nasty, they weren't sort of spiteful. They didn't want to say, you know, get in the queue, mate, you know? And I thought this was also partly due to the Queen, that we wanted to behave very nicely.
A day to be nice.
Pardon?
A day to be nice.
A day to be very nice.
Lovely.
Yes.
Angela, thanks so much for coming in. Really appreciate it. Angela Levin. More than 70 aircraft took part in today's Jubilee flypast, delighting fans of aviation, others too. The airborne salute from the Royal Navy, Army and Royal Air Force gathered over south-east England before congregating for that final approach over Buckingham Palace, watched by the Queen and members of the royal family. Our armed forces have been making the event in other ways. Sailors on deployment in the Gulf lined up on flight decks, forming the number 70 to mark the totality of the Queen's reign. We're joined by a former head of counter-terrorism at the Ministry of Defence, Major General Chip Chapman. Chip Chapman, welcome to you. What did you make of today?
Oh, it's been an amazing day, but really it shows you the longevity of the second Elizabethan age, really, because in terms of the aircraft, we had the prop-driven, propeller-driven Lancaster, Spitfire and Hurricane, to really what is a flying computer these days with the F-35. And also in terms of the Queen being a member of the Auxiliary Territorial Force in the Second World War, wielding a spanner, nowadays you'd wield a diagnostics machine. So it shows that although technology has moved on, the decency and values which the Queen has given to the country over 70 years have been that constancy which you want from a head of state.
I know you're a soldier, not a pilot, but how difficult an exercise is that, marshalling so many aircraft and then funneling them down the Mall in the order in which they come, and so with such precision that they can actually spell out in the skies a number 70?
Well, we talk about the 6 Ps, prior preparation and planning prevents poor performance. And this is exactly what you saw today, both in terms of airspace management, the airspace restrictions over what is normally a very, very tightly controlled airspace because of the proximity of Heathrow and Gatwick, and actually the amount of space it takes to formate all those aircraft, the 70 aircraft, out to the wash and get them in a synchronized time frame at a precision time of 1300 to 13/6 in London. That takes a lot of planning. It doesn't happen by accident.
Chip, as a soldier, when you look at the numbers of soldiers on parade, at the Horse Guards parade, does it remind you that the British Army is, at one level, compared to the early days of the Queen's reign, a fraction of the size it was?
Well, I think one of the constancies, again, is how we do ceremonial. And if you were to look, for example, at Pathé newsreels of George VI, you would see the guards as they are today. What has also moved on is the technology in the land environment as well as the sea and air environment. So we probably get more bang for our buck. But like all these things, the army is always too big generally in peacetime and too small in war. What I would argue at the moment is it's too small in peacetime and certainly would be too small in war.
I suppose when you talk about getting bangs from your buck, I mean, there's an argument against square bashing, which, I mean, you can tell, we can't tell when a line's not straight or people aren't marching in time as they exactly ought to be. But it's said that the Queen can tell.
Well, I'm sure she can. She's got the best view if you have an elevated view of these things. And of course, drill is done there as a focus of initial obedience to orders as a form of discipline. The real trick, if you're tactically excellent, which you won't see, of course, on a drill square, is when you can depart from drills, because that is what you do in a thinking soldier on a battlefield, as my regiment did in times of war.
OK, Chip Chapman. Thanks very much indeed. Thanks for your thoughts, as ever. Chip Chapman joining us there to talk about the military involvement today. Well, one of the most important relationships in British public life is the one between the monarch and Prime Minister. Queen Elizabeth II and Margaret Thatcher reputedly had a complicated relationship as they worked together for over a decade. Let's turn to Niall Gardner, director of the Heritage Foundation, the think tank which includes the Margaret Thatcher Centre for Freedom. Niall's a former aide to the Iron Lady herself. He's just sprinted into the studio, for which we welcome. Niall, thanks so much for coming in.
It's a great pleasure to be here. Thanks very much, Colin.
Have you enjoyed it today?
It's been a wonderful day, a truly inspiring day, and a great day for not only for Great Britain, but also for the entire free world, because I think in many respects the Queen has been the leader of the free world for the last 7 decades, an absolutely incredible leader who inspires, I think, anyone who believes in freedom and liberty across the world. So a wonderful day for the United Kingdom, but a wonderful day as well for everyone who cherishes, the great leadership that the Queen represents.
We saw the message from President Biden and his wife. We like to think, don't we, about the special relationship and how the royals are embraced in America. We're going to be talking to our friend in Los Angeles shortly. He'll tell us about the reaction there and the way the media are covering it. What's your sense? Big deal in the States or not?
Yes, it's a huge deal. In fact, every major US network is covering the Jubilee celebrations. There are tens of millions of Americans watching the celebrations on TV. This is a huge media event for the United States. So a lot of the big US anchors are on the ground here in London right now covering the event. So, and the Queen is just hugely popular, I think, with the American people. The opinion polls show that. She has about a 70% approval rating among Americans. That compares to, about 40% or less for Joe Biden.
Who are the 30% who don't approve of her, Niall?
Exactly. That is a good question, Colin. So we need to find out. So the Queen, is immensely revered and liked across the Atlantic with very good reason, because she embodies in many ways, the beating heart of the US-UK special relationship. And she's loved, I think, by the vast majority of Americans.
I mentioned that you've, in a previous life, worked for Baroness Thatcher. I'm sure you know far better than many people the truth of those rumours that at times they had a fractious relationship, monarch and Prime Minister. What is the truth of it, do you think?
Well, so I worked for Lady Thatcher for nearly 3 years in a private office after she was Prime Minister. The reality is that she absolutely adored the monarchy, and the monarchy was hugely important to Lady Thatcher. She had a very close-knit partnership with the Queen, both as Prime Minister and after leaving office. And so the Queen, for example, attended Lady Thatcher's 80th birthday party in 2005. It's unusual, actually, for the Queen to attend birthday parties of, former Prime Ministers. And that was an example of the very close-knit partnership. Also, Lady Thatcher was awarded by the Queen the Order of Merit, December 1990, just a month or so after leaving office. Only 24 people at any one time can actually hold that award. So recipients have included Florence Nightingale, Winston Churchill, for example. And Margaret Thatcher was given that award on the personal advice and decision-making of the Queen. And that's an example, I think, of the tremendous esteem that Lady Thatcher was held in by the Queen herself. And so, there's an awful lot of sort of counter-narrative stuff coming from, programmes like, The Crown, for example, saying that, Margaret Thatcher and the Queen did not get on. The reality is they had a very strong partnership, a huge amount of mutual respect for each other, and the two most powerful women in the world, basically, when Margaret Thatcher was the Prime Minister alongside the Queen. So this was a powerful alliance, actually, between the two.
Niall, I want to come back to you in a second and talk about whether some Americans lament the missing Crown figure in American public life when things are so, at times, extremely cast against each other politically. But just you mentioned the Crown. Rafe Heydel-Mankoo is here. People like you get very annoyed at the way that Netflix depicted a living person's reign and some of the inaccuracies. Has it done them more harm than good?
It's certainly done the monarchy no favours in America particularly, and also around the Anglosphere, because those programmes really should have a warning at the beginning to say the events you're going to see are based on...
We're almost out of time. No, just to answer that question I posed to you, I mean, do you think when American politics is so toxic, do you get people sometimes thinking, crikey, monarchy's got something to say, a calming effect, stops things becoming too extreme?
Yeah, I think so. The Queen is seen as a great uniting force, not only for Great Britain, but also on the world stage as well. And she's somebody who brings people together, and she also brings people together on both sides of the Atlantic. And that's one of the reasons why Americans really love and cherish the Queen, because she embodies that spirit of tremendous unity between the United States, the United Kingdom, but also the unity that brings the free world together. And she is, she is a tremendous leader who has dedicated her entire life to serving the British people and also to leading the free world as well. And so what a wonderful achievement.
Niall Gardner, lovely to see you here. Thanks
Great to
very
see you,
much
Colin.
indeed. Coming up, beacons will be lit all around the UK this evening and across the Commonwealth to mark the Queen's Platinum Jubilee. We'll be joined by our Northern Ireland reporter who's got the story for you. But first, we have a short break.
Hello, I'm Patrick Christie's.
And I'm Mercy Moroki.
Make sure that you join us Monday to Thursday, 10 a.m. until midday, right here on GB News for To The Point.
We're not afraid to talk about the topics that matter to you or the big topics that always matter.
We cover absolutely everything, from the breaking political stories of the day to law and order, what's going on in the channel. We're not afraid to hold people to account.
We always make sure we include your views on our show.
Indeed, if you're thinking it, you can guarantee that we're saying it. So make sure you join the conversation with us, 10 a.m. until midday, Monday to Thursday, for To The Point on GB News.
We are GB News.
We're right across this great nation.
On TV,
on radio, on digital.
Absolutely everywhere. We don't talk down to you.
We embrace all voices.
With honest and civilised conversation.
We're not part of the establishment.
We're one of you. And we're only getting started.
Join us on GB News,
the People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
Every morning from 6 o'clock, we'll wake you up with GB News Breakfast with all the stories you didn't know from the night before.
So whether it's serious news, entertainment, or your own views from all over our great nation, we're here to kick off your day with a smile.
The national media should be reflecting and reporting what's happening here.
You will notice the northwestern accents.
Whether you're with us on TV, radio, or online, every morning, it's breakfast from 6 a.m. Hope you can join us.
Join us for Ministry of Offence, the comedy panel show that's just like the news, in that the left fights the right and it doesn't really seem to matter who wins. We cover the big stories. It was in fact a troop of baboons and not angry vegans.
I like that.
And the really important stories.
Fat naked cow gets stuck in swimming pool.
It's a headline in a lot of local newspapers.
We're on the same team, Nick. Yeah, but I'm just helping you.
Join us for Ministry of Offence, Saturday nights, 8 o'clock on GB News.
I'm Dan Wootton. Join me Monday to Thursday from 9 to 11 for the feistiest and most fun news debate on TV, where free speech reigns. I'll bring you a sharp take on the day's biggest stories, bombshell newsmaker interviews, and A-list guests. And I guarantee you, no spin, no bias, no censorship, and no reason to go to bed. That's Dan Wootton tonight, Monday to Thursdays from 9 on GB News.
You're with Colin Brazier on GB News, on TV and on radio. Beacons will be lit all around the UK this evening and across the Commonwealth to mark the Queen's Platinum Jubilee. We sent our Northern Ireland reporter, Dougie Beattie, to find out about one very special one in Enniskillen in County Fermanagh.
A ferry returns to Ballycastle from an island whose spider supposedly inspired a Scottish king in the 1300s. A royal beacon will be lit here to celebrate the Queen's Jubilee. It will be one of over 1,000 across the UK. Beacons and bunting are part of the British life, but where did it all begin? Fire has always been used as a long-distance communication device, and a beacon such as this one behind me was built to warn the locals that Napoleon was close at hand. Local historian Michael Copeland explains.
The original beacons were built by a warrant issued by the King, and the taxation was levied by the sheriff. During the Napoleonic Wars, Martello towers replaced many of the beacon sites. They were all based on an original design from Martella Point in Corsica, a flat top tower with a fire on top of it that was designed to alert the local population of the approach of African pirates in search of treasure and slaves. The Napoleonic Wars saw the construction of literally hundreds of Martello towers across the British Isles. There are 70 on the island of Ireland alone, which equates to 1 every 28 miles of coastline.
Mike Coolan is at the front of Ballycastle celebrations and tells us what we can expect later this evening.
Well, I think this is an event that will never be witnessed by any of us in our own lifetimes, indeed in the future. She has reigned for 70 years. Well, we'll start off with the Holy Trinity choir, who will sing 2 hymns, followed by the piper, who will place a medley of Irish tunes, and then the bugle call to the Jubilee beacon lighting, followed by a specially written piece of pipe music, Diu Regnar, by the piper.
Beautiful Ballycastle will be lighting its beacon tonight at 9:45, along with the rest of the UK. Festivities here will be getting underway at around 8 o'clock.
Let's talk live to Dougie Beattie now. Dougie, welcome to you. For many people, certainly those people watching the lighting of beacons tonight, it's ceremonial, but actually, as you explained in your piece there, it served a darker purpose at one time.
It did indeed, and I must welcome you to Killylay, actually. We've been around the province, as you say, from Enniskillen, Limavady, Londonderry, Antrim, Ballycastle, and now we are here. And I'm standing in front of a Loire-style castle. This was the Queen's, or still is the Queen's representative in Northern Ireland. It is the only castle in residence that holds the royal coat of arms above it. And yes, even round here, just down on the coastline, there was beacons. They go back to the times of the Greeks. They warned of invasion, they warned of trouble coming, and they were there to protect the coastlines. Now, they have moved on somewhat, and we do have bonfires here on the 11th of July, but they are totally different things altogether from beacons. Beacons are now used for celebration, and tonight there will be one here as well, all to be lit at 9:45. We'll also have start off the celebrations here with a lambeg drum. It was another way of telling, I suppose, like a beacon, the story across the land. It is a huge drum. It has a cow skin on it, and it is battered with 2 canes. And it was how regiments talked to one another on the battlefield. So sound and fire together. We then go to the pipers, the choir, and then the lighting of those beacons. All now gas, or I believe the one at the front of Buckingham Palace is to be LED lights, just to keep inside the green story. But a great week for Northern Ireland. We had the centenary last weekend celebrations. This weekend we have the Jubilee. And I am old enough to remember the one back in the 70s, believe it or not. I can hear you saying no, but yes, I am. And I remember the red helicopters coming overhead, landing in Thiethel Barracks, and Her Majesty coming through Belfast. So it's quite a thing here. On my way down here, I passed through the small small villages. People were out cutting their grass. Really that sort of holiday feel that I haven't felt in the bank holiday in quite a long time. We are on the coast here and there is a lot of movement through the seaside towns, so it's great to see. The Jubilee definitely seems to have had the effect that it's meant to have here in Northern Ireland.
Real feel-good factor. Dougie Beattie, really lovely to talk to you. Thanks ever so much. Rafe Heydel-Mankoo alongside me, just on that point that Dougie makes there, that actually what can sometimes seem choreographed, ceremonial, had an historic purpose, and that's often what you see in some of these royal rituals. You can dismiss it as pomp and pageantry, but very often it's telling a story.
Absolutely. I remember in 1988, we marked the 400th anniversary of the Spanish Armada, and I was a young lad, and I was fascinated by the beacons that were lit along the coast there. That's one of the things about the monarchy, is that the Queen is the physical embodiment of the crown, but it's also of our collective story. So if you look at royal traditions, look at the slamming of the House of Commons door in Black Rod's face when he knocks. That's because of history. That's because of King Charles I being denied entry, having previously entered with armed men. Those sorts of moments are... We don't have a written constitution, so it's through traditions that our constitution can be explained to the public.
And just a thought there, Dougie talking about the feeling in Northern Ireland. There is a sense at the moment in which the United Kingdom, there are centrifugal forces. Some people say that it's pushing the component parts of the UK further away from each other. Somebody said to me the other day, there aren't many things that unite these British Isles, but the royal family continue to be one of the, if not the key thing.
Well, it's interesting that you were speaking about Margaret Thatcher and the Queen, because many people had said that Margaret Thatcher thrived on confrontation, whereas the Queen thrives on unifying people. And I respect... I had both of their portraits on the wall as a teenager, I have to say, along with Churchill.
It's not very rock and roll, Rafe.
But, no, absolutely. The monarchy transcends party politics. It stands for something greater. It stands for the nation. It is something that all people can aspire to. You can loathe your Prime Minister and support the country and the monarch.
Rafe Heydel-Mankoo, thanks very much indeed. More from you later on, I'm sure. Coming up here... More than 1 billion people worldwide expected to watch the Queen's Platinum Jubilee celebrations over the next 3.5 days. Nowhere tuning in with keener interest than viewers in the US. We'll get a live update from Paul Duddridge from Los Angeles. Stay with us.
Good afternoon. The top stories this hour. The first of the Platinum Jubilee celebrations have been taking place today, with Her Majesty the Queen watching the royal fly past from the balcony of Buckingham Palace. Royal Air Force jets flew in the formation of the number 70 to mark the number of years of Her Majesty's reign. And the famous Red Arrows also took part in the display today, streaming the Union-coloured flags in colours in smoke above Buckingham Palace. Royal gun salutes were also taking place right across the country as part of the celebrations. And the Duke of York will miss tomorrow's Jubilee Thanksgiving service at St Paul's Cathedral after testing positive for COVID. Buckingham Palace says the infection came to light during routine testing. It's understood Prince Andrew has seen the Queen in the last few days, but not since he tested positive. NHS Director Professor Stephen Powis is among over 1,000 people who've been recognised in the Queen's Jubilee Honours list. He'll be made a knight, while the Chief Nursing Officer Ruth May will be made a dame. The actor Damien Lewis being made a CBE, and the Scottish crime writer Ian Rankin has been knighted. Meanwhile, the former Northern Ireland First Minister and GB News presenter Arlene Foster has been made a dame.
Well, of course, it's a personal honour and I'm really delighted with it, but I hope it will be reflected back on the people of Fermanagh and South Tyrone who give me such support when I was their member. And indeed, as I say, as the first female First Minister, it's wonderful to have this acknowledgement.
Well, in international news, President Zelensky of Ukraine says Russia now occupies a fifth of his country. The Ukrainian leader says 100 people are dying every day in fighting in the east of the country. And that comes as British military intelligence says Russia has control of most now of the strategically important city of Severodonetsk. You're up to date on TV, online and on your radio via DAB+. You're with GB News. Brazier's back in a bit.
Direct Bullion sponsors the Finance Report on GB News for gold and silver investment.
Let's give you a quick snapshot of the markets. The pound is 1.256 to the dollar. It is 1.170 to the euro. And the price of gold currently stands at £1,488.22 an ounce.
Direct Bullion sponsors the Finance Report on GB News, investments that matter.
We are GB News.
We're right across this great nation.
On TV,
on radio, on digital.
Absolutely everywhere.
We don't talk down to you.
We embrace all voices.
With honest and civilised conversation.
We're not part of the establishment.
We're one of you. And we're only getting started.
Join us on GB News,
the People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
Every morning from 6 o'clock, we'll wake you up with GB News Breakfast with all the stories you didn't know from the night before.
So whether it's serious news, entertainment, or your own views from all over our great nation, we're here to kick off your day with a smile.
And the national media should be reflecting and reporting what's happening here.
You will notice the northwestern accents.
Whether you're with us on TV, radio, or online, every morning, it's breakfast from 6 a.m. Hope you can join us.
Join us for Ministry of Offence, the comedy panel show that's just like the news, in that the left fights the right and it doesn't really seem to matter who wins. We cover the big stories. It was in fact a troop of baboons and not angry vegans.
I like that.
And the really important stories.
Fat naked cow gets stuck in swimming pool.
It's a headline in a lot of local newspapers. Yeah.
We're on the same team, Nick. Yeah, but I'm just helping you.
Join us for Ministry of Offence, Saturday nights, 8 o'clock on GB News.
I'm Dan Wootton. Join me Monday to Thursday from 9 to 11 for the feistiest and most fun news debate on TV, where free speech reigns. I'll bring you a sharp take on the day's biggest stories, bombshell newsmaker interviews, and A-list guests. And I guarantee you, no spin, no bias, no censorship, and no reason to go to bed. That's Dan Wootton tonight, Monday to Thursdays from 9 on GB News.
You're with GB News and you're with Colin Brazier on TV, online and on digital radio on a very special day. More than 1 billion people worldwide are expected to watch some part of the Queen's Platinum Jubilee celebrations, including in the United States, of course. The fact Harry and Meghan have flown over from California to join the royal family. Certainly Meghan was pictured at the Admiralty building today. Their involvement likely to, well, it certainly will not dampen interest in the United States. The first time their children, Archie and Lilibet, have, assuming they do meet their grandmother, of course they will, it's the first time that will have happened. We're joined from Los Angeles by podcast host Paul Duddridge. Paul, welcome to you. It's often, it can be quite sobering sometimes when you are doing wall-to-wall coverage from a story in the UK and you assume the world's attention is absolutely fixed on it. So it's always interesting to check. Is this, you know, where is it, if at all, in the news bulletins in Los Angeles? Where is it?
It's in, believe me, it's in. It's getting a lot of coverage. It's been wallpapered across all the breakfast shows this morning. I diligently watched every channel in lieu of this item because I wanted to double check that that was the reaction from the Americans, because that's how we sometimes perceive the Americans, as being sort of gaga about the royals, and they have actually lived up to expectations. There is a wall-to-wall coverage on national breakfast shows this morning, and that's usually a good indicator of the barometer of popular appeal in the US.
Large portions of those shows coming from Buckingham Palace itself, so a massive outside broadcast, OB.
Very much. That's a very good question. Yes, very much. And it is wonderful to see Americans interviewing Brits, being a Brit in the States. And no matter what guest they get on, whatever little vox pop guest they get, whatever member of the public, they can't understand a word they're saying. It's fabulous. So to see an American with a microphone talking to somebody from like Newcastle, nothing against the Geordie accent, but then just going, yeah, the pageantry. You know, it's wonderful. It's like you're standing on my foot.
I've got to tell you, Paul, the reverse of that is also true. I remember when I used to do the Royal Beat, and you'd be looking for people to interview, and the Americans never let you down because they all, as you know, they're all talking sound bites, and they all actually talk a lot of sense very often. So absolutely perfect as people to put into your reports. We've got, what is it, nearly a minute 45 into this conversation without really mentioning Harry and Meghan. I'm guessing that is part of the drive, and that's part of the reason we've got those big studios that have been built outside with dollars for the American networks. That they're curious about what happens next.
Do you know what? There's actually less of an interest. There's a daily waning interest in America by Americans of interest in Harry and Meghan. You've got to remember, Spotify and Netflix are American companies. And they, there is no rumour, there's no truth in the rumour, actually, that Henry and Meghan have attended because this is the only TV gig that they've still got this year. Netflix and Spotify, cancelled projects with them. So you can actually see that the litmus test. Obviously, I mean, you know this. It's what is the audience reaction? If those companies felt that Americans would, in huge volume, watch or consume those shows, they wouldn't have been cancelled. So it gives, again, it's another indicator. The mainstream shows, again, the breakfast shows this morning weren't focusing on Henry and Meghan. They were focused on the Queen. And again, it's kind of, and actually talking about Trooping the Colour, which I found was quite, that was quite fun. So less than you'd imagine. I honestly think now we've ended up in this kind of, the kind of parallel universe where Brits assume that Americans are consuming Henry and Meghan, whereas actually they're kind of less and less interested here. They're not stupid people, the Americans. They understand market forces.
That's really interesting, and actually quite encouraging, dare I say, as well. It's fascinating. I just wonder, earlier on, we had one of the leading royal commentators in this country, Angela Levin, and I said to her earlier in the week, was it a mistake? Was it a mistake for the palace to invite Harry and Meghan over? She said, absolutely it was. They'll regret it. They will not be able to help themselves. It's like the scorpion and the frog. It's in their nature. They'll have a Netflix camera somewhere filming what they do. That was her view. Do you demur from that? Do you think they'll play nice? They'll do as they're told?
I do, and they may not. I think if we're getting into allegories of scorpions and frogs, I would go Sun Tzu, The Art of War.
Fables.
The royals have determined the field of battle. If they'd been snubbed, that is Harry and Meghan controlling the negative. The fact that they were generously given an invite by the magnanimous, Her Majesty being magnanimous, then I think that can only play well. It's a win-win from the Queen. She either gets them to come and it's on, her biggest day ever, or they turn down the invitation and look churlish and spoiled. So I actually think it was a PR stroke of genius.
Paul, when you look at that coverage on the networks this morning, and some of it's funny inadvertently with misunderstanding the Geordie accents, etc. I saw one of the, I think it was the ABC studio. They fixed up wood panelling, and there they are talking about Trooping the Colour, etc. It is its own answer to that question often posed by Republicans in this country: what is the royal family for? I don't know what percentage of the tourist dollar is drawn by all this flumery, pageantry and pomp, but it can't be a small portion.
Well, it's not a small portion. Look, I'm on the fence with this. The problem with the tourist argument is that France, having obviously very famously got rid of its monarchy, does very well competitively with its tourist dollar and visits to the Palace of Versailles, etc. So I actually don't think that correlation's ever really been made. I think it's far more profound than that. I think that Look, I looked up the most recent YouGov poll on this. Only 5% of Americans would want a monarchy, which is interesting, bearing in mind how much attention they pay our monarchy. But they do understand the constitutional nature of it. It's very, very interesting because America, if you think about it, has been in everybody else's business for the last century and sees how despotic many other countries are, and indeed has had to create a kind of separation of powers in its own in the USA to make sure despots don't take over. So there is a much more innate understanding in America, I think, of the power of an unelected head of state.
Absolutely fascinating, as always. Paul Duddridge, thanks so much for your time. Really appreciate it. Thanks a lot. Rafe Heydel-Mankoo, just alongside me to ponder on any or all of what Paul had to say. They're going big, the American networks, but as Paul said, the interest in Harry and Meghan in America is declining.
Well, it's very telling that they weren't invited to the Academy Awards. They weren't invited to Obama's 60th birthday. I mean, their status depends upon their proximity to the crown. And as their world moves further away from the orbit of the monarchy, and Montecito, California is a long way, that status begins to ebb. And we've seen that. And we've seen, of course, I think the reality is Americans aren't that interested in Invictus Games, for example. The Netflix and Spotify want really meaty subjects. And if there's no access to the royal family, then they're going to be denied all that. But I just did want to say one thing, which was the fact that we got the 2012 Olympics, and because we wanted to get the exposure globally that the Olympics would bring Britain, and the idea was this would encourage people to visit. They cost billions of pounds to put on the Olympics. The year before that, you had the royal wedding of William and Kate for a fraction of the price, and you had just as many eyeballs on television screens. I mean, that is bang for your buck.
That is soft power right there, isn't it? Rafe, thanks very much indeed. Well, from street parties to pageantry, banners to bunting, millions of people across the country and around the world will today celebrate the Queen's 70-year-long reign. Filmmakers in the northeast of England have been delving into the vaults to create a special tribute to Her Majesty. Our reporter Rachel Sweeney has been finding out more.
From Queen Elizabeth's post-coronation visit to Tyneside in 1953 to Her Majesty opening the Tyne and Wear metro system in 1981.
And I have great pleasure in declaring the Tyne and Wear metro system open.
Royal visits to the northeast have been proudly documented by local filmmakers. To mark the Platinum Jubilee, the Northeast Film Archive has pulled together amateur and professional footage from across the region to create a special film called Seen to be Believed.
This completed film was later shown in communities across the region so that everyone could experience the excitement of the visit.
Graham Relton is the archive manager. He says the film takes an affectionate look at the North's relationship with Her Majesty.
I love to see it's less about the Queen, it's more about the people and how they've celebrated and how they've come together. And, you know, interestingly, things haven't changed a great deal. It's still trestle tables, it's still bunting, it's still people getting dressed up in fancy dress and celebrating as a community. The Queen obviously is important, but I think it's a great excuse for people to come together.
One of the contributors is Chris Anderson, who filmed the Queen's Silver Jubilee in 1977.
Filmmaking has been my, not so much professional life, but amateur, if you see what I mean, but for 45 years, and I absolutely love it. And the fact that there's something come out of it like this, just the icing on the cake, or the icing on the Jubilee cake in this case.
And it's not just video archive the Northeast remembers, it's those royal front pages too.
Probably the first royal visit to our area in 1956 when...
Chris Lloyd covers royal visits for the Northern Echo.
People actually standing on top of lampposts and things, eager, craning to get a view of her. And that's really the situation really throughout our archives tell how for decades these rare visits have been real highlights of people's lives, really. It's amazing the way that she's able to touch people.
Including Peter Barron, MBE, who was the Northern Echo editor for 17 years. He was invited to a private function at Windsor Castle and regrets picking up that canapé.
I dropped the beetroot and puree canapé on this very plush pink carpet in the middle of Windsor Castle, and it just left this horrible purple and green smudge on the Queen's carpet. And she started to walk towards us, and I said to the editor of the Oxford Mail it was, what am I going to do? And he said, scoff it. So I had to pick it up and eat this pureed pea and beetroot canapé full of fluff, and within 30 seconds the Queen was there shaking hands.
He won't forget that. The region won't forget the scenes of celebrations. The nation will never forget the Platinum Jubilee. Rachel Sweeney, GB News.
Absolutely fantastic footage, and lovely to see some old colleagues from the Northern Echo. The Queen has appeared on the Buckingham Palace balcony as part of official celebrations for her Platinum Jubilee. Let's go live to our royal reporter, Cameron Walker, who is live at Buckingham Palace for us right now. Cameron.
Good afternoon, Colin. Yes, I mean, what a historic day we have had here in Great Britain. The first time ever that we have celebrated a Platinum Jubilee. 70 years on the throne. Her Majesty has been with service to this country. Now, Trooping the Colour was the first event on this Blank Holiday Jubilee weekend. It was the 1st Battalion Irish Guard who were trooping their colour. Prince Charles actually took the Royal Salute at Horse Guards Parade. He was doing it on behalf of Her Majesty. We know Her Majesty has had mobility issues recently. Also at Horse Guards, noticeably, were Harry and Meghan. We spotted them at the Major General's office, very much out of sight of the cameras, but there were one or two photographs that have appeared of them, but it certainly did not detract from the main event. It was very much, I think, at that window, Prince George, Princess Charlotte and Prince Louis, the Duke and Duchess of Cambridge's children. And actually, in the carriage, there was a beautiful moment when they were riding down the Mall, Princess Charlotte and Prince Louis. Prince Louis was waving frantically at the crowds who were ecstatic to see them, and Princess Charlotte kind of subtly slapped Louis's hand away to stop him from waving, because perhaps she thought that her younger brother's wave was slightly too excessive for the moment. But when they came back from Trooping the Colour, the Queen stood on the balcony with the Duke of Kent and took another royal salute. It was just her and the Duke of Kent, but then they were joined by other working members of the royal family, senior working members of the royal family, on the balcony for that fantastic fly past of 70 aircraft for 70 years of Her Majesty the Queen's reign, RAF jets, as well as Royal Navy aircraft and British Army. And it's the largest number of aircraft actually that's kind of flown over Buckingham Palace since the RAF centenary back in 2018. So a truly special moment, Colin.
Cameron, and it's lovely to be there, I'm sure. Thanks for bringing us all the coverage you brought us today. Cameron Walker at Buckingham Palace. Thanks very much indeed. Rafe Heydel-Mankoo was at Buckingham Palace earlier today, here in the studio now, for the last couple of hours, reflecting on what has been a faultless day, first of four. What are those big punctuation marks in the Queen's reign?
I think the big punctuation marks were really trying to adjust Britain to a world post-empire. We had transitioned from a period before the war, when she was young, when we were the largest power in the world, and she had to see managed decline. Yeah. And it was, I think, in many ways, her ability to unite the nation that avoided the social unrest you got in France, for example. If you look at the 68, if you look at what happened in Algeria with all the fighting, in some ways the monarchy made people think everything was still the same. Even though there was radical change, there was some constancy there and a grounding element. And I think that's what the Queen actually symbolises, is through all the change. And the monarchy has changed through each generation.
Even recently, I mean, there you were enjoying the crowd yourself. For some people, they will have been the biggest crowds they've been in since lockdown. And there was the Queen in the depths of lockdown. We will meet again, she said. So there is that sense in which she is the nation's grandmother.
She has become the great matriarch of, and I think we're showing that support for her too.
Important, though, for royalists, I know we both are, that people recognise that it is the institution that matters every bit as much as the individual. You will hear people saying, well, I'm no royalist, but I like the Queen. And that's a problem for this institution, which she's corralled and weaved through these shoals so carefully.
It is a problem, and we have to avoid the cult of personality when you're talking about national institutions. That's very important. But she's left the monarchy in good form. She's set a remarkable mould for others to learn and get inspired by. But as she said, look to the future. And we saw in those carriages the future. And if they hadn't had their hearts captured so far, I think the Platinum Jubilee would have ensured that the nation's hearts were captured by those 3 young children, as well as the way that they interacted with each other. I think we're hoping to see a second balcony appearance on the Sunday, which may include just the line of succession. That's the way to look forward to the monarchy.
Rafe Heydel-Mankoo, thanks so much for your contributions today. Look out for the lighting of the beacons at 9:25. Nana's next.
And looking ahead to this evening, it is going to be fine dry, with plenty of warm sunshine for most, though there is rain in Northern Ireland. Let's have a look at the details now. Let's zoom into the southwest, where we can see there's plenty of sunny spells with just a little cloud bubbling up, which could produce an isolated shower or so, but it's going to stay mostly dry. If we head to the east, the weather is pretty much the same. Lots of warm, sunny spells, with a little cloud bringing the risk of an isolated light. Let's head to Wales now. It's going to be mostly dry again with warm, sunny spells, though we could see a couple of clouds and they could produce an isolated shower. If we head eastwards into the Midlands,